Welcome to another episode of A Brother with Questions. I am your guy, B. Period. Thank you guys for joining us. We got a live studio audience today, guys. All right, man. But tonight I got a guest, man. Today, joining the show. His name is Darius. How you doing, Darius?
All right, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Doing wonderful, man. So Darius joined me today. Obviously, everybody knows Montgomery Brawl happened over the weekend, and Darius and I were talking. Darius wanted to share his thoughts. I've shared my thoughts on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. It's all over the place. TikTok is doing really well for me right now. I appreciate y'all. But Darius wanted to chime in on it as well. So Darius, tell me what you're thinking about this Montgomery Brawl.
I mean, honestly, I'm just, if I could be honest, I'm proud of our people. Like, I'm proud of, we saw something that we thought was unfair, and we were quick to jump on it and make sure that we took care of business. Outside of the obvious, I mean, like, my guy jumping off the boat to swim to the other side to make sure he is a part of this, bro. Like, man, you
What
can't.
they call him, the Black Aquaman?
The Black Aquaman, look.
The Black Aquaman. I heard one more thing they said. I can't think of what it was, but they said something else with another character. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's amazing though. Like, honestly, like, and the type of traction that it got, like, I think overnight everybody was on top of it. I think, as a community, not so much celebrating, I would say, the violence, but more so the togetherness that, y'all got to be careful. Like, you can't just take one of our people down and not think that, we're not going to be around the corner to help out. And I think for a long time, we weren't doing that. I think for a good while, there was a lot of separation in the Black community. And before, anybody would, help out, the phones would be out recording and everything. I think this was quite the opposite. Like, people would just answer the call and was just on top of things. And I'm so proud of this moment and this time.
So, I've been listening on the internet today, and I've heard that sentiment. And I don't disagree that it was good that they stepped in and, defended the brother and not let him get beat up. But one of the things that, as I was thinking about a lot of the sentiment that you're displaying, I don't know that this is a movement. I think this is a moment, but I don't really see this as a movement. And what I'm gathering from you is I'm gathering that you see this more as a movement, as a change that we're going to see moving forward. Am I reading you right?
So maybe not a movement, because I can see where you're coming from in that sense that, like many issues that have arose, some have become movements and some have kind of just been overnight, and fizzled out the next day. I do think this does plant a seed, though, that moving forward, we're going to be less likely to pull out a phone and just be a bystander and just document. We're going to be in what's going on, whatever form that takes. I mean, unfortunately, hopefully it's not another brawl, but like, if people are needing to step in and they see an injustice, they're actually jumping in and taking care of business rather than just watching it go on and then trying to, find a way to make things work afterwards. It almost feels like we're asking for permission to be heard. And I think this is kind of one of those things, like, nah, like, this is different now.
Let me ask you this question.
Sir.
So another take that I heard today was this idea that white people have been consistently trying to take advantage of Black people, and we haven't pushed back. We've just basically allowed them to do whatever it is they want to do. Do you agree with that sentiment, that we've just got this string of incidents happening where white people are trying to take advantage of Black people, and this is this moment in time where we've said enough is enough? Is that the sentiment you think, or
Quite honestly, I don't know if I could speak on that because I haven't seen outside of this. I haven't seen incidents where I would say white people have, at least not recently, have taken advantage of black people. I do think.
Well, I'll give you an example of what they were saying. So some of the examples they talked about is, obviously it wasn't this year or last year or anything. I think it was the year before. But you had the incident in New York, I'm sorry, in Central Park, where the black man was bird watching and the white lady came up and was, I can't remember at some point she accused him of trying to attack her. But you have that incident. Obviously, you had several incidents where you had some of the children in the street doing lemonade stands, and then a white woman comes along and says, you're not allowed to do this lemonade stand. Of course, there was an incident with the barbecue situation, and the white woman came along and said, y'all can't be barbecuing out here. So, in their examples, so those are the types of things that they were talking about that for them showed how white people were taking advantage, and then were taking advantage of black people, and then black people not responding. That's what they were trying to say. And so they looked at this moment with Montgomery and were like, not anymore. We're not going to stand for this anymore.
That's interesting. With those examples, I would say it's kind of hard to say that that would be the case. I mean, I think our black community did well in those instances when they arose. I mean, particularly with the woman, I forgot, I remember they gave her a nickname, barbecue something, barbecue Sandy or something like that or whatever. I know, but I think they did well in terms of like, they stood their ground. They didn't interact with her. They didn't get into anything. I think in the times where it needed to be done, where action needed to be taken and, force needed to be, put forth, it was. But in those instances, I don't think white people took advantage of us. I think there was an attempt to, but I feel like in those instances, we handled ourselves appropriately. I think for this instance, this is letting people more so know you don't get to use force on us and think you're just gonna walk away from it unscathed. Like, understand, like, we have been very understanding and very patient with you, but the moment y'all cross that boundary, no more. And I think that's what I enjoy most about the videos is like, y'all really stepped over the line. And I think because we've been patient with you, you think it's okay. And now it's not okay.
Okay. So in your mind, moving forward, we're gonna see, let's say you do get Karen that wants to stop the barbecue. You think there's gonna be more, not so much so that you're gonna attack Karen.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a greater pushback to not allow her to sort of interrupt what's going on.
Yeah. Most definitely. And I think more so, especially with this generation, I think this generation's lost a lot of patience for the injustices that's gone on.
Real quick, when you say this generation, who are we talking about?
I would say maybe your 20s and to your 30-year-olds. I want to say, like, especially the kids that are just coming out of school. I think a lot of the young kids today now question a lot of authority thanks to things like social media and just the internet on a whole. Like, there is a lot of more questions and things that we can raise and answers that we can get to ourselves and conclusions that we can come to ourselves, just because of the communities that the internet allows these kids to be in and everything like that. And so we're not looking to, I say we, but I mean, this generation is not looking to take everything at face value, especially from those of the older generation, who, kind of operate on this kind of respect thing. But it's like, I think more so it's respect is earned and not, given until you've earned it, right? If that makes sense.
No, I understand what you're saying. So let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
So, I just want to push back a little bit on this generation. Would you say 20s to 30s, right?
Yes, sir.
20s to 30s, and not or better understanding how to access information and then effectively use that information to their benefit. That's your argument, correct?
Yes.
So I'm gonna push back and say I don't see that.
Hmm.
I don't see that in your particular generation. And I'll tell you why. So I agree that you certainly have greater access to information than the generations prior to you, right? So we won't disagree on that point. But I am going to disagree that you guys are effectively using that information in order to move anybody forward. And a couple of arguments to that. So when you look at voting, right? The voting numbers aren't there, not to that level, not to confirm what you're saying. When you look at actions, when you look at the actions, what has that generation done that other than, because you guys typically lead all the protests today. So I'll give it to you. You lead protests, but what action has been taken beyond the protests to really support what you're saying? Is there anything you can think of?
Off the
Because
top.
I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
I can't think of it. so I'm just saying.
No, that's fair.
Is there anything that you can think of? I mean, I understand. I certainly understand what you're trying to say, but again, where's the proof? I'll give you an example, right? I think some people would tout like Black Lives Matter as the proof, right? And so Black Lives Matter, of course, everybody knows the history, right? Organization started by some group of lesbians. Essentially, that's what they are. Okay, that at the time were trying to. I think the initial movement started really around Trayvon Martin, and then the movement obviously went into overdrive after George Floyd. But when we look at the actions of Black Lives Matter, right? Yes, they began a movement and they began a conversation, right, about Black Lives Matter. Cool. They even raised a bunch of money. Cool. But essentially, that's where it stopped. Because as a foundation, they initially had in their bylaws about ending the nuclear family, which, I mean, if you talk about destruction, I mean, that's at the top of the list right there. I mean, so we got that. That's a negative, in my opinion. Then we look at the movement. So the movement produced a conversation that was national. The movement raised, at least in principle, they raised at least, let's say, I'll give them $100 million. But once that money got raised, which a lot of it was pledged, wasn't actually given to them, but the money that was given to them went to causes related to the alphabet community, for the most part. So overall, when we talk about a movement, where does that movement really land in terms of moving Black people forward, other than creating a national conversation? We're not pausing. The audience wants us to pause.
I was gonna say,
but we're not pausing.
Okay,
they want us to reflect. They didn't like that word.
They don't hear us.
But go ahead, man. Let's talk, man. We talking.
I mean, no, it's a conversation. All good points, all fair points. I can only really speak from personal experience. I do think, with my experience on social media, I've come to understand and learn a lot of things affecting Black people that I didn't know before. especially with like the Black Lives Matter community or not community, but the movement. It is unfortunate how it began and what it was supposed to be in inception just kind of never panned out, I guess you could say. Um, I do think, I guess, in that instance, that was a group of people using a platform to, push their own agenda or narrative of everything that is being spoken is true. Then, yeah. But I do think also on top of that, though, it did open up a lot of people's eyes to a lot of issues, a lot of young people's eyes to a lot of issues, myself included, that I was not aware of in terms of what is going on in our community, just in our backyard. Personally,
I was gonna say, give me an example of something that you weren't aware of that because of what was going on social media that you now are aware of.
I wasn't aware of. That I wasn't
Yeah, because your statement was
aware of. Right.
there's a lot of things that you saw online
Yeah.
that you that opened your eyes to things going on in the Black community. And so I'm just curious, what were some of those things?
So I guess honestly, I would say the Black Lives Matter allowed me to go down a sort of rabbit hole in terms of, okay, so there's this injustice here. But for me personally, honestly, I can't think of an instance. Forgive me.
That's okay.
I can't think of a particular instance as of right now. No.
No?
Goes to mine.
Okay. No problem. No problem. We just
Goes to mine.
We're just talking, man.
Yeah.
We're just talking right now. Man. We're just talking. So picking back up, right?
Mhm.
So you were talking about your generation being more aware and so forth. And so I would say this about your generation. I think there's a role that your generation certainly should be playing. And I honestly agree with you that there's an opportunity for you guys to do greater things than the generation prior to you. But one of the things that I think that you guys have to do, number one, you got to vote in greater numbers, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're not voting, you're not talking. And that's the bottom line. Well, it doesn't matter if we're talking about local elections, if we're talking about national elections. If you aren't voting,
Right.
you are not talking, because politicians are trying to get into office, and in order to get into office, they need votes.
Okay, so the audience has something to say.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead, talk to us, audience.
You being the prior generation, right?
Sure.
Would you say that you've done your due diligence teaching your children who are now this generation how to vote?
How to vote?
What each ballot, what each section in the voting what it means, or do you just say our ancestors fought for this, so it's your right to go vote, but we don't know what any of that means? Or are you leaving that to the school system to teach us how to vote?
Whoa, wait a minute. The school system's job is not to teach you how to vote.
But did you teach us how to vote?
So
Would you say that's a yes or no question? Do you think you did your due
I'm going to
diligence?
answer your question.
Okay.
So the answer to that question is, I don't believe you can be taught to vote. What I think what is done and what should be done is that you should be told that voting is important. Now, once you're told voting is important, if there's a question about why it's important, then we can talk about that question. The answer that I would give you, if you ask me why is voting important, it's important because voting establishes every rule, law, action, movement that occurs in this country. It's all based around voting. Okay, so that's why it's important. Now, beyond that, it's up to the individual to now do their own research as to how they want to vote, who they want to vote for. While I can tell you, I can only tell you my opinion. I can't tell you what you should think. And I don't want to tell you what you should think.
Right.
I want to tell you to vote so that you can go read and do whatever research you want to do so that you understand your own opinions and you can vote for the people that you want to vote for.
Right. So
Okay?
that's not meaning like the party, not saying tell me what party to vote for, but telling me if I vote for this person in this section, what am I saying yes to or no to?
So,
What am I, and I think we don't get that help with, and I can only speak for our community, the Black community. I don't think we get that help learning what that means, but it's so much pressure on knowing what that means. And some people struggle with just reading, period. So if I can't read, I need somebody there to assist me because still my vote matters.
So,
right?
Yeah, but that goes back to the research that we all should be doing. Because I'll be honest with you, that's not going to change. 50-year-olds are reading those ballots and going, well, what does that mean? How is this going to affect my taxes? And then it's up to them. And there's plenty of opportunity too. There's all kinds of organizations who exist to explain what a yes or a no on the ballot initiative means. Mm-hmm. Right? And there's organizations who toe the line and just give you the facts. There's organizations who want to brush you towards a more conservative vote. There's organizations that want to brush you more of a liberal vote. So all of that research is available to everybody, which is why you have to do the research yourself. Now, if you want to go to someone older than you and say, hey, can you explain this to me? Obviously, you can do that. But I personally don't think that it's the job of the older people to chase you down, to tell you, to explain it to you. And I'll tell you why. Because voting is a personal thing. And how you vote should be decided based on what your personal beliefs are. And so as the elder, even though I may understand it better than you, I still want you to go out. I still want you to find out what you think it means for yourself. And then once you've established your opinion, let's talk about it. But I don't want to tell it to you without you going to see what it is for yourself. And I agree. Reading is a huge problem in this country.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that don't know how to read. There's a lot of people that can say words with the best of them. Mm-hmm. And after they finish saying the word, they be like, oh. And so that's a huge problem. But again, you are now, if you're voting, you're at least 18 years old.
Right.
Right? You're an adult.
You're an adult.
In life, you're going to hit a bunch of different obstacles that you're going to have to find a way to overcome. Okay. And that's your responsibility as an adult to find your way over those obstacles. It's not the responsibility when you're on the job, if there's a question about something that needs to be done at the job, perhaps you do go to your manager. But there's at some point your manager is going to train you enough that you don't need to come to him to answer that question. Voting is the same way.
What you just said is your manager trains you. And I'm not saying that I want to go to an older generation. I'm saying I'm going to my parent who just told me the day I turned 18 to go register to vote, but they didn't tell me what any of that in that section meant. Just your vote matters. That's your voice. Let your voice be heard. And then I go look at the ballot and I can't read X, Y. I know I can read, but I don't understand how this affects my personal life. But they just told me to go vote at 18 for the first time and they can't be next to me. So I do believe it is a parent's responsibility as well to at least walk me through it. Not saying be an independent, be a Republican, be a Democratic, because I'm Christian, none of that. But what does it mean simply in each section? How does this affect me? Wow. And that's it. Yeah, and that's what training like a manager would do. And then once you said, I've said that, go figure out the rest. Then you have that freedom to walk away and be like, I did what I had to do. But the older generation puts so much pressure on us to vote, and they don't realize that we don't know anything that we're voting for. We're just circling names because it's two people on a piece of section. That's all I'm saying. But y'all go back to y'all. That's the audience. I'm out.
To bounce off of that, well, or more so to bounce off of you said like as an 18-year-old, you're an adult, but I think a lot of times we forget that they were also a child just a year ago. Like they were more a child than they were an adult. Just a year ago.
Ain't nothing
Honestly,
changed.
honestly, they're still children.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, even
we talk. But see, here's
guidance.
That's the idea though.
love.
So I got another point I want to add. So that's the idea though, and why I keep going back to research. Okay. So to me, the biggest problem we have in this country, and you guys are putting it on 18-year-olds. But can we be honest? 18-year-olds don't know what they're doing. 25-year-olds don't know what they're doing.
Wants those 18-year-olds.
35-year-olds don't know what they're doing. 55-year-olds don't know what they're doing. 65-year-olds don't know what they're doing. Most people who vote have no idea what they're voting for. That's the truth.
I agree.
Well, so people who vote, I mean, in my mind, don't even know. I mean, you said local elections. People don't even know about local elections.
Most people don't vote in local elections. The average councilman wins his election by less than 1,000 votes. Mm-hmm. Some councilmen win their elections and the total vote count was 1,000. So, but here's my point is, what you're talking about is a huge problem, not for 18-year-olds, but it's a huge problem across the board for the voting public. Mm. It's the reason why Black people just vote Democrat. Because it's easier to just go with the D, because apparently the D is supposed to like us better. Mm. So, so the biggest problem with the entire electorate is the idea that nobody wants to do research. And so for some people's parents, while they may tell you it's important to vote, they also can't tell you what yes or no is. So it's not that they're not trying to train you, it's that they haven't done the research themselves. And so that's why, as an 18-year-old, as a 25, 55, 75, it's important for all of us to be doing the research, to find out what the Democrat guy wants, what the Republican guy wants, and which one of those things is going to be better for my life.
Well,
and that's a personal decision. It's up to us to understand when they put the constitutional amendment, this is what the yes means, this is what the no means. And now I have to decide personally how I feel about the yes, how I feel about the no. And so it's not that the previous generation is hiding information. In a lot of instances, the previous generation didn't know the information either, right, because they haven't taken the time to do the work either. Because a lot of them, this is the research they do. They'll wait for that Democratic society who explains the yeses and the nos, and then makes the recommendation that, you know, you go yes this one, no that one, yes this one, no that one, and then because this Democratic organization said go yes no, they go yes no, and they still don't know why yes or no from a fundamental standpoint to be able to explain it back to you. So that's why it goes all the way back to, you have to know it's important to vote. And then your second responsibility. And even though I agree, it probably is too much responsibility for an 18-year-old, but you have to go and do the research. You say something, then I got a question.
All right. So in doing the research, because I know, I think I remember reading up on something where it was saying it's also important to know political language. Like, so, I mean, when you listen and sit down on the debates, and let's not talk about more recent debates because I was just fools. But like political language in terms of knowing how to decipher what it is the left or the right wants, or what it is they're breaking down, and what kind of I guess terminology that they'll use, because a lot of times for a lot of people, that's, like you said, it's big words and they might use it in conversation but don't know what it means. But for a lot of those guys standing up on the podiums and doing those speeches and doing those debates and doing those talks. We don't know. And I think if I was hearing what the audience was saying, maybe not so much me personally, maybe not putting it on the older generation, but I do think those who are in authority should take more responsibility, who typically is the older generation. Those who are in authority should take more responsibility in educating the younger folk that, hey, this is what this all means. Maybe it's not in schools now, but maybe it should be. Those talks should be happening. Like those classes should be introduced because these are the things that's going to affect our future, but they're not really being taught.
So there's two arguments there.
Mm-hmm.
So the foundational argument would be that's why you have civics courses in schools. They're not going to teach you the language because the language is really what they're doing is they're highlighting a message and then they're driving home a message, right? But they're going to teach you the foundations of why these things are important. So that would be one argument as far as it being in school. Okay. Then understanding what the politicians are doing. The politicians are talking about gaining power, right? And so gaining power is about manipulating people into a feeling that is going to make you more interested in them as opposed to somebody. And so that's always purposely going to go over your head because it's not meant for you to understand exactly what I said. It's meant for you to connect to me emotionally based on a basic principle so that you'll want to vote for me versus my opponent.
But just the same way that they could learn how to do that, couldn't it be taught how to decipher that?
No, because that's going to change based on the conversation.
Expand on that.
So if based on the person running, the way you speak is going to change. So I use Donald Trump as an example. What Donald Trump does well is Donald Trump knows how to talk to a people who don't typically get talked to. So his conversation, he does a very good job of doing a very simplistic conversation so that even on a fundamental level, emotionally, you can feel it. That's why he won. Okay? Obama was very similar to that. He connected very simplistic to a basic idea that you could connect to, and then therefore you would want to see him in power. Trump, Obama. Trump, one could argue Trump learned from Obama, whatever you want to say. He's just had a lot more experience because he's been doing it his entire life. He's been selling folks for 30 years, but that's what we're talking about right now. Getting back to what you said that, or connecting this idea that we should be taught better in schools. So there's a Republican candidate running right now. His name is Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay, he has a proposal. In his proposal, he says it's a proposal that's going to hopefully increase love for America. Okay, that's the goal of the proposal. So what he wants to do, he wants to amend the idea slightly of automatically voting at the age of 18. Okay, so here's his vision. In order to basically draw in and make that 18 to 25-year-old feel more patriotic, want to participate more in elections and voting that we're talking about. What he wants to do is make a service requirement for that individual, or have that individual take the same test that an immigrant would need to take in order to gain its citizenship. So it's a civics test to prove that you understand how government runs in the country. Okay, and so at the age of 18, right, you're automatically can vote, right?
Right.
So he wants to amend that and say from the age of 18 to 25, your voting rights are dependent upon either one, doing some sort of service to the government, okay, or two, taking the same civics test that an immigrant will be required to take, passing that test. If you pass it, you get your right to vote. If you don't pass it, you don't get your right to vote. Or if you choose not to do service, right, and you fail the test, then you don't vote. Now once you turn, he said 18 to 25, so I'm assuming based on what he says, once you turn 26, that automatic right, regardless of what you do or don't know or whatever, it's extended back to you. But from 18 to 25, it's going to be dependent upon either passing the test or serve. So my question is, in being in that, one of the reasons why 18 to 25-year-olds don't vote is because, number one, they don't understand the process. They don't understand what's on the ballot. Would something like this proposed service requirement, would it, number one, draw you in to actually love your country for real? And then two, would it also potentially, do you think, make you more interested in the process and learning more about the process so that, you can pass this test and then ultimately vote?
I think the service part of it, I don't think it's going to go over well.
No, I'm just saying, you mean with the generation?
Yeah.
Okay.
With this generation, I don't think the service part of it will go over well. And I don't.
But it's an either or. It's not have to.
Right.
It's an either or. Yeah.
Either or. I also don't think that with the test, because, we already get kids that don't want to vote. And you're putting a test on top of it. I do think now the difference may be with the test. I think I lean more to that only because does that mean, are we going to be prepared for this test? Are we going to?
Well, you take, like I said, in high school, everybody takes a civics course. Everybody. It's a requirement. It certainly is in Florida, I know for sure. So I'm assuming on most states, or at least it would have to be a requirement, right? Because you'd have to make sure they have the knowledge.
Well, at this point, yes.
And so, but there would be a requirement. Obviously everybody takes U.S. history as well. So, I would say you're getting the information, and then if you're going to give them a test, you would obviously have to make sure they at least have that information.
Right. So I think this is, in that sense, I lean more towards the test if the stipulation is we're going to.
So how do you feel about the plan, though? Do you think that's a good plan to pull that 18 to 25-year-old into seeing the importance of voting, and then number two, the love for country?
No, I personally no. Especially because I guess this generation, there's a lot of times where they felt that this country has not had their best interest at heart. So I don't know if a test or service will opt for this generation to want to, invest more into their country. I would say, if for nothing else, if we are just trying to get people out to vote, I think one place that, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Australia does this. They fine their citizens if they don't vote. I do think if we're just trying to get people out to vote, if we're trying to get this generation to actually pay attention, the quickest way to do that, let me touch your pockets.
So you'd be okay with them fining you for not voting?
Yes, because I think at that point that makes you pay attention. Like that makes you be like, yo, like.
So let me roll that back.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I heard you right.
Yeah.
So you think having you take a test or do service would be too much, but you'd be okay with being fined?
I think in terms of results, I think finding people will make them go and like look into voting. Like you don't want. I think anything that touches your pockets is gonna make people be like, whoa, hold on. Like, you gonna find me if I don't do this? Like, just like you don't speed, you don't, you don't throw your trash out on
Correct.
the road. Yeah.
You don't speak.
No. Fair enough. I don't speed. I don't want nobody coming in my pockets. Especially I can't afford no speeding ticket.
Everybody else is speak.
I mean, what? Guess you got a left foot.
Oh my God. But okay. This it's been interesting. This has been interesting. So let me ask you this question. Let me ask you another question. Sure, audience got another question. Go ahead, audience.
Okay, audience. My question for that, the amendment that he wants to make, the reason I think it will not roll over well is going to be with Black people. I'm not going to service a country who don't care about me. And it is evident time after time, year after year, situation after situation, we're constantly, it's an injustice. It's just not fair. We're not being treated well. You're not fighting for my rights. Why would I go in turn service a country that doesn't, which I get the point that he's trying to make, such as like he wants us to love our country or have this deep respect and gratitude for the soil that we're on. I do understand, but in turn, we need something that shows us that we're fighting for something that loves us, because we're not going to fight for hate. Or I'm not going to do this 10-hour course and this country is constantly belittling me and making me feel like I don't have a place in it. So that's just kind of my little input. Y'all keep going.
That was good input.
You agree with that?
That was good input.
So here's my question. So I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't. The history of this country is obviously, and where we began in this country, as Black people, was obviously not on the right foot. Okay. So obviously we spent years fighting to get better, and we're at a point where I would argue that we are the best it's ever been in this country. So when people say to me that Black people are being treated unfair in America, and they say that's being done nationally, to me, I always look for or try and really understand the examples that show that nationally there is a movement, even let's say in 2023, to keep Black people down. What's the national movement in 2023 that's meant to keep Black people down?
You can look at that even in pullover when they get stopped on the side of the street. If it's a white cop against a Black person, their protocol, or not even protocol, because it's not protocol, they're going against protocol for a Black person based off of the color of their skin. They're doing searches that's not warranted. They're violating them. Some of them are dying. Okay. And that alone is our government. That's our not government. That's the state. So it's happening nationally. It can happen in Florida. It can happen in New York. It can happen across the country where it's being proven that, or it's not even going far enough up into government where they make a difference to stop this.
I would say if we can even just talk about mass incarceration of Black people in this country, and just for how many, for a ratio of non-people of color, because I don't want to exclude anybody else outside of people of color, but non-people of color and people of color. I don't think it would be a stretch to say it's probably a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio in terms of how many Black people go to jail for the same crimes white people do not. That's you can stretch that back to slavery time, because and we know that has just been an evolution of slavery, from Jim Crow to now, the prison system is just a evolved form of what that's always been.
Okay. All right. So I'm not gonna say those things don't happen.
Mm.
Okay. So obviously those things happen. But when I think about let's talk about we'll kind of walk through this a little bit. So when we talk about the police,
Mhm.
okay, and the things that happen with police, there are probably 3 or 4 million cops in the country, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, but it's probably in the millions, right? The incidents that we're talking about, and I'm focused on today, because that's what I'm really trying to get at.
Mhm.
The incidents that we're talking about today are maybe in the hundreds.
The ones that are
That
reported.
reported.
Fine. We'll put it in the thousands. Okay? We'll put it in the thousands. When you're talking collectively about incidences, because we're looking at percentages as far as I'm concerned, when you look at the percentage of people who are probably stopped by the cops on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, the instances that we're talking about probably amount to, I'd imagine they're less than 5%. So when we talk about a country and when we talk about the police department that is supposedly purposely, quote unquote, holding Black people down or misabusing Black people, when I think about the idea that we're talking about less than 5%, I don't think you can go less than 5% represents what the majority of people are doing. And then on an individual basis, we're talking about individuals. And so this country is always going to have a level of racism in it. Always. Because that's the foundation of what was built. So if the level of racism that we're experiencing today is less than 5%, and then I top of that on the fact that I don't think you can eradicate it, to me, less than 5% is an increase, it's progress. It's progress. And if less than 5% are experiencing this problem, that means the majority of us aren't. And so, can you really legislate that problem down to zero without changing the hearts and minds of every single officer in the country? And then you ask, can you change the hearts and mind of every single officer in the country? Because the truth, in my opinion, you can't.
You can't ever change anything.
So you can't change the individuals.
But
So all you can
change-
do is legislate or prosecute those individuals when the situations come up.
And that's the thing, and I think, and that's the point I want to make, is that you can't change the individuals, but you can change the systems that allow them to remain that way. Or granted, they can still remain that way, but the fact of the matter is that it's still happening. And I get you saying it's never going to go away, but in certain areas of authority that you're allowed to exercise that belief and get away with it speaks volumes to. It may only be happening in 5% or 5% of the community and only a certain amount of people and on an individual basis, but the fact
it's
that
not 5% of the community, I would say 5% across the nation.
Or across
it's
the nation.
Less than that within the community.
Ugh.
You know how you know it's less than that?
How so?
You've been on this earth for 20 something odd years.
Yeah.
How many times have you been stopped by the police and had an experience that was negative?
I mean, outside of just being stopped.
Sometimes you do wrong things. So, but how many negative experiences have you had with police?
Probably two.
Two. 2 negative experiences. Okay. And if you had to ballpark it, how many times do you think you've been stopped?
It's funny we was talking about this. I think let's say three or four.
So 3 or 4 times, 50% of those experiences have been negative. Interesting. Do you remember anything about the 2 negative experiences?
The mainly I would say, and I guess you can kind of say this for both of them. Not to the extremes of what we have seen, but
No. I just want to know.
well,
you
for me
consider
personally,
something
demeanor. Like I do think a lot of times the type of demeanor. So if there is no, attitude coming towards you as, the person that is being pulled over, I've experienced those 2 times where, I just feel as though I don't know what you're about to do. Like you seem like you have a demeanor of like aggression in this moment, and I'm not sure where that's going to lead. And both times, unfortunately, it's been a white.
So your negative experience that you're describing is not that he did anything. It's the fact that when he came up to the window, you felt unnerved. You had nervousness about how that reaction is going to take place.
Right. And my thing is, given what has happened and what we have seen, it's like, what will I say? What will I do?
So let me ask you another question.
Yeah.
So being that the cop didn't do anything wrong per se, are you saying did he do something wrong in his stop of you? Or was it simply the nervousness?
So could I answer that question with a question? So
Sure.
If you went into a restaurant and were seated and you had a waiter that kind of came at you sideways from the moment you sat down, you feel some type of way about that waiter.
Would I feel some type of way about that? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like you would feel some type of way of the way that waiter was treating you, especially because you don't know this waiter, you had no beef with this waiter, but all of a sudden this waiter's coming at you sideways. Or even take it a step further, you have a coworker that's coming at you sideways, and you're just like, "What's up?" Like,
I got that. Okay.
Now, I guess in this instance, now you have an officer that you given like the state of things, and I'm sure a lot of it can be attributed to what you hear and what you see. But even still, when the state of things are as sensitive as they are, when somebody comes up to you, pulled over at night with a lot of aggression, and you're not sure what it is you can do to subside this aggression because you're not sure what's got them angry, or the fact that you could just be angry because it's me in the car. Like,
So here's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
Based on what you talked about. I think in that situation, and I, obviously we have no way of knowing what that cop personally was feeling about you or the stop at the time, or whatever the case may be. But here's what I'm going to say. What you're saying about him could be totally true. But I think that being that nothing negative happened to you, other than the nervousness and the uncomfortability, how uncomfortable you felt based on his attitude.
So can we say that's nothing bad?
So here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we can't attribute that convincingly to simply that it was you, the black man, he pulled over. Because one, and one might argue this is neither here nor there, and maybe they should quit if this is their problem. But police officers, most of them probably had PTSD. Right?
Okay.
So as a police officer with PTSD, and you could argue that he shouldn't be on the job if he does. I won't disagree with you, but it is what it is. A lot of people do jobs that they shouldn't be doing. If he has that though, and when he approaches you, for whatever reason, it's triggered, that could at least explain why he had an attitude. Or it could also explain why he was mad in the moment. Because who knows? Maybe before he pulled you over, his wife called him and said, I was leaving. So there's a number of things. If he did not do anything negative or anything foul with the stop, there's a number of reasons why he could have had an attitude that has nothing to do with you personally. And I think too, especially as Black men, there's a PTSD that we carry when it relates to the police. And a lot of times it's not even what happened to us. It's what we've been told could happen, or it's what we've seen happen in TV. And so because of what we've heard, because of what we've seen on TV, we have an angst, a nervousness. Is this my time? That cop that stopped us wasn't even thinking about. And so, not that I don't necessarily, I'm going to say that you didn't have a bad time, but I do want to push back and just go, if nothing negative happened to you, regardless of what his attitude was, he did all the right things. And so I would ask, could you really call that a bad situation? Just because he did it to a point where he didn't make you feel comfortable? Because the waiter, he has a responsibility to make you feel comfortable because he's hoping you're going to tip him well.
Okay.
Because he recognizes whether he chooses to do it or not. Some do, some don't. Some care, some don't. But he recognizes my tip is going to be based on my service. And so if I treat you bad, my tip is more than likely going to be affected. And whereas if I treat you great, my tip could increase. And whether that waiter decides to act on that in any moment in time, there's an understanding that that's the case. Now, he's obviously going to get some people that come in there and he's going to be really great. And they was only planning to tip $5 anyway. That's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But the general sense of how most people do is based on that service. Even with, the co-workers. If we're working together to accomplish a goal, there's an expectation that we're always going to be nice to each other because you catch more flies than honey. So, but in this cop situation,
what's
there's nothing he's gaining from you. See what I'm saying? There is a power dynamic happening in that situation. Mm-hmm. And as the person experiencing it, I understand that we want that to be a pleasant situation. That's what we want, because we don't want to feel like we're being dominated at any point in time. But I would argue, while it would be great if he did that every time, I don't know this. It's to say that that's his responsibility.
Interesting. My thing is, because my thing is, so the word you use is dominated, which, in my opinion, I won't say this is fact, but in my opinion, anytime that somebody in that kind of position of authority has a negative demeanor and you say PTSD, but I'm gonna chalk it more up to, I want you to know I have control of the situation. I don't think anybody enjoyed. Well, I'm not saying this because adults out here. I don't know if anybody enjoys being dominated in those instances. I don't know if anybody enjoys being dominated in those instances, especially when you, once again, just with the air of how things are, and like you said, with the angst of black men in the black community, and we already know it's bad enough I'm getting pulled over, but at the same time, you're now coming with this kind of demeanor that is supposed to instill fear in me, and it has. And as a man, it's kind of hard to say that another man is put me in my place, or
Right.
so to say. But and once again, this is a lot of generalization and talking for him. But I think in those instances, I do believe that is the goal.
Yeah,
Because
right.
I think at a certain point how this is going to go, especially like I said, if I greet you like, hello, good evening, officer, and he's asking me, and he's coming down on me and giving me the whole nine and everything like that, and I'm just like, where is this coming from?
Right.
Then I'm just like, now I know, like, I'm not a threat. Whatever PTSD that you have, it's out the window. I'm not a threat. So what is this charade we're doing? What is this show? What is this song and dance?
And I think what you're talking about, and I'm not trying to say that he couldn't have been kind or whatever you want to call it in that moment.
Mm.
I think that was certainly an option. But what I would say is that because he didn't give you that option doesn't automatically assume that there was ill will, especially related to who you were, right? We can't definitively say that. And one of the things that I want to get at here with this conversation is that so we've been led to believe, and I say this as someone who I certainly used to ascribe to this myself, so I'm not knocking you for feeling the way you feel. I used to certainly carry those feelings too. But one of the things that I have been recognizing is I'm looking for real roadblock. Okay? Because, even in the examples you gave, you all related them back to crime, right? So if a cop pulls you over, right? Now, obviously, there are instances where they may just pull you over for no reason. But generally speaking, if a cop pulls you over, he pulled you over because you were speeding. He pulled you over because you ran stop. He pulled you over because your tail light is out, right? Mm-hmm. So these are all things that are under our control. We can decide not to do those things. Okay? I'll give you an example. I don't know what you were doing at that time, but I guarantee you whatever thing you were doing at that time, you probably don't do anymore.
I mean,
generally speaking. So you won't find yourself back in that situation because of those reasons. And even with the mass incarceration, one of the things about mass incarceration, I hate that argument today because the president of the country was the architect of the bill that started mass incarceration. So I find it hard to believe, find it hard to receive, especially from Black people, that there is a problem with mass incarceration when we've elected the architect of mass incarceration. Here's the point.
Yeah.
Yes, it exists, but how bad do we feel about it when we've allowed the man who architected it to be our president? And we fight to the death for this man, and we're about to try and fight to death to put him back in office without asking him to change mass incarceration.
So, and I think the key word there is allowed. And going back to the voting conversation is we're not informed, or at least we don't feel informed enough to actually go out and do these things that will make the change for these people. Now, once again, though, like you said, we allowed. We didn't vote this man in. I don't think anybody wanted to vote this man in. I think we're aware but I don't think a lot of people know how to change that situation. I think there's that.
Well, he all goes back to voting.
Right. And
I mean, when he was a fish dead in the water until he got to South Carolina, and one of the biggest black senators in South Carolina, James Clyburn, decided that was going to be his guy, and he made sure that his guy won South Carolina, and that was the ball that got him rolling. You know, and then he rode the coattails of, I was Obama's vice president, as if that's supposed to mean.
no, that's true.
But so these are those challenges that I see. You know, going back to, because where we got here from talking about this idea from the audience that the country is holding Black people down, and for me, I'm never going to allow anyone I have a conversation with to convince me that America is holding this country down, because the opportunities, while there still may be challenges, those opportunities are numerous in this country, numerous, and the reason that, and a part of the reason why Black people have not taken advantage of some of these things is partly due to our own education. It's not due to our opportunity. Because a lot of us, even, I'll use myself as an example, there's a lot of things that I didn't understand in my 20s that have impacted me in my 40s. And so, as a result, I'm probably not where I could have been. Well, I know I'm not where I could have been because I wasn't educated enough to know what I should have did in my 20s. And so that has nothing to do with the country. That has to do with the lack of education I had at that time. And so when I think about young people coming up today, their challenge is not opportunity. Their challenge is not having the education to take advantage of the opportunity. And so I just, and then when you look at what's the alternative, where are you going to go? Because none of y'all are leaving this country. Because if y'all were, y'all would have packed y'all bags and left. But y'all not. So rather than talk about why not then focus on those challenges? Because it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And it's never going to be perfect. There's no such thing. But focus on educating yourself on what the opportunities are and chasing those opportunities. Because you got to understand, in this country runs on two things: voting, money. That's it. You want to change things? You vote, you make money, or you raise money, as you said. And those two are the fundamental things. Now, there's a lot of education you can do so that you can prepare yourself to get to the money. It might mean doing a job because it pays well for a number of years so that you can get to the money and then branch off to doing something else. It might mean doing something that sounds uncomfortable to you for a little bit so that you can get to the money and begin to do something else. But it's curbing not the opportunity, because the opportunities are numerous. It's curbing your thought process to understand that the money is there, educate yourself on how to get to it, and now move forward with whatever your idea is. Because no matter if you're Democrat or Republican, at the end of the day, we're all chasing the same thing. They want the power. In order for them to get the power, they got to get to the money. And so the man with the money always is going to have access to the power. Because politicians aren't moved by your emotions. You know? And the challenge that when I think this generation, and even my generation, we haven't put up the money. We're still riding off the emotion. And so the change that you're looking for, the change that you want to see happen, all these things may be possible, but they're going to require money, not the. Because at the end of the day, they'll kneel down in the Capitol building with a Kunta Kinte cough around their neck. Because emotionally you said, oh, they care.
Ooh.
But when they go to their office,
yeah,
they're not going to sign the bill because you ain't put up the money. So I can't let that ride on this idea that there isn't opportunity in this country. Is they're holding black people back. Ain't nobody holding black people back except black people. Because black people are focused on talking instead of voting and raising money. Because you put $1 million in the candidate pocket, oh, he gonna listen to what you got to say.
Right.
Whether you're Democrat, whether he's a Democrat, or she's a Democrat, or he's a Republican, or independent. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're doing. They're raising money. Because they're trying to get the power. That's it. So, I'm going to end this conversation with this. Because I'm being pressured to end my podcast. And that's not, I'm pressured to end my own podcast.
That's a...
But where we ended this conversation, I think is good. And I just want to encourage young people your age. Darius is 20 years young. Darius could have been my son. But especially people in your generation, there's so much opportunity waiting at the fingertips of you guys, and begging for you guys to take advantage of, that it blows my mind. I'm not going to say all of you guys should be millionaires by the age of 50. But I will say all you guys should be few 100,000 by the age of 50, simply by taking advantage of those opportunities that exist today. And for those of you who don't know what those opportunities are, y'all Google everything else. So Google what those opportunities are. With the age of AI as well, fastly approaching, and really starting to have a true influence on society, there's really no reason why you guys should feel like there is no opportunity in this country. Now, the American dream doesn't look like it did 70 years ago. 70 years ago, the American dream said you get a husband goes out, gets a job, the wife stays home, she takes care of the kids, he comes home, he pays all the bills. If he makes enough money, y'all do your vacations, and every year, whoop, 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 whoop. So the American dream doesn't quite look like that anymore. The American dream today is based on a 2-income household. And that 2-income household can achieve all that they want to achieve today and retire a millionaire by the time they're done, assuming they make the right moves as a couple. But the door isn't closed by any stretch of the imagination. And the barriers don't exist to the point where you can't walk through them. But you do have to, I'm going to say, step out on faith in order to achieve those things. And as they say, embrace the failure. Because if you work at it hard enough, you're going to fail one time, 2 times, maybe. But embrace that opportunity, learn from your failure, keep pushing forward. Because this life today is nothing but opportunity. It's knocking at your door, wondering why you haven't answered. And on that, man, we're gonna end this episode. I am done. I want to thank Darius for joining me today. Appreciate you, Darius. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. B period. I'm out.
Get up.
Should I do part? Leave it alone? Part? Nah.
Oh, Did you stop it? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm still recording. Go ahead. That's your plug.
What was I saying? So we got our podcast coming out. Please be on the lookout. It is myself, Sierra, and Julian. Three of us are starting a podcast called Wisdom. Wiz, W-I-S, Dumb, D-U-M-B. It's going to be for the audience who wants to learn and grow, and who feels like we should know it all, but we actually don't know anything at all. So come be with us. We're hoping to have on, a lot of guests and just talk about life and figure it out all together.